At 7 in the morning, Joe wakes up to the AI butler's wake-up service. The smart home is already prepared, ready to provide its owner with a relaxed and convenient experience. The butler promptly reminds Joe that he has an important appointment today with none other than Ash, the woman in the photo by his bedside. Their meeting seemed destined. In a quiet bookstore, he happened to walk in just as Joe was there. A hardcover book, coincidentally on a topic they both loved. A cup of rich, aromatic coffee quickly brought them closer together, and a photo together became a lasting memento. Some love stories have nothing to do with slow and steady affection. Sometimes, a single glance is enough to decide a lifetime, but no one can predict what will happen next, except that it will be passionate and unforgettable. They live in a world where technology is highly advanced. The development of artificial intelligence can take care of every aspect of people's lives, but there are still some things that require a personal touch. For example, exchanging warm greetings with a familiar newsstand owner at the corner, or sharing an intimate date with a loved one on the street. But Joe has no idea that today's date will turn his life upside down. Perhaps even his entire world. Joe just wanted to chat and express his love to Amaro as usual. Unfortunately, his lover across the table looked grave, as if he had something to say but couldn't get the words out. He had something important to tell Joe, but it was so heavy that he could barely bring himself to speak. He wasn't a local, in fact. He wasn't even from this world. Joe was completely confused. He clearly couldn't understand what those words really meant. But fate didn't give him a chance to think. In the midst of their conversation, the threat had already arrived. A gatecrasher slowly approached Ash and, ignoring his pleas, ended his life with a single shot. Joe couldn't even react. All he could do was helplessly cradle Ash's lifeless face, praying that none of this was real. As the killer walked away without a care, Joe, realizing what had happened only after the fact, rushed after him but lost him at a corner. In utter silence, that person vanished into thin air in the dead-end alley, leaving not a single trace behind, as if nothing had ever happened. 2 weeks have passed since then, and every day Joe tries to wake up from this nightmare, but that is nothing more than self-deception. Love truly died, and with it, Joe's soul perished as well. Every day he drifts through life in a daze, each day feeling like a year, but clearly, someone is unwilling to let him go on like this. Today marks the third visit from the newsstand owner, who's been Joe's friend for many years. Oliver, who thoughtfully brought Joe his favourite hot coffee, but Joe has already lost his sense of taste. As he lifted his hand, he accidentally knocked over the coffee, spilling it all over the floor, yet he didn't even have the slightest intention to move his feet. When the soul loses its anchor, all that remains in the world is an empty shell. Oliver wanted to offer some words of comfort, perhaps to say that love is in a better place, but Joe interrupted him. He didn't want to hear any of that. All he wanted was for Oliver to leave him alone. Helpless, Oliver could only walk away, hoping that time would heal everything. But time did not take away Joe's grief. Instead, it seemed to pile up layer by layer, like reciting lines from a book. After a long silence, Joe got up and went out, walking through streets and alleys, as if retracing the brief course of his own life. When he returned home again, Joe brought back something that could end his pain. Knowing no one would answer, he still said goodbye, as if bidding farewell to his doomed fate. But fate played a trick on Joe. The first shot, fired in his nervousness, failed to go off. The second shot after the first also failed to fire, and by the third, fired with determination, Joe was exhausted. The fourth shot, aimed at his navel, instantly blew up the pillow he was holding, startling Joe so much that he jumped up repeatedly. This time, he changed positions, but even after gathering his resolve, the fifth shot still didn't go off. Joe was furious. He raised his hand and fired the final shot while he shattered in response. With firm steps, he strode out the window. At that very moment, Ash's voice suddenly sounded behind him. Time seemed to freeze, as if in a dream or not, and Joe was startled awake by a gunshot from the but everything was just as it had been before. The AI butler reminded Joe that a message had been sent on time, but he was clearly already dead. So, was the one sending the message human or ghost? Terrified, he dashed out the door. The chilly air helped him regain some composure, but the world outside was filled with a sense of eeriness. The face of a woman walking toward him was covered in garbled code, and the screens on distant skyscrapers kept glitching, displaying Ash's messages. One after another, the messages popped up on his phone, forcing Joe to seek out Oliver to prove he wasn't losing his mind. Fortunately, Oliver also saw the messages on Joe's phone. Frankly, he said this might be a message from Ash, and wanted to open it to check. At last, he saw the face he had been longing for day and night. Ash told Joe to retrieve the book she had left for him, after which she would know all the secrets. But the moment Joe opened the title page, a jarring, flickering sensation shot through his entire body, and all of this was clearly observed by the hidden hand behind the screen, under their surveillance. They kept a tight grip on Joe's every move, and after Joe took action, they were actually able to easily control two passers-by through some kind of operation, preparing to take Joe out directly. One of them followed Joe straight to his doorstep, but Joe quickly sensed something was wrong. He dashed back inside to grab his gun and hide, launching an attack the moment the assassin entered. Unfortunately, Joe's marksmanship left much to be desired. He actually made the assassin laugh, but in the very next second, it was as if Joe's body was moving on its own. Bang bang, 2 shots took out the assassin with perfect accuracy. Before Joe could even be surprised, the other assassin arrived, and the two of them immediately got into a fierce fight. Just as Joe was starting to fall behind, his movements suddenly sped up as if he was in double speed. He smoothly dodged all of the assassin's attacks and knocked him to the ground with a single karate chop. Realizing something was wrong, the assassin demanded an upgrade for himself and instantly gained the strength to fight back. But even after a few more rounds, the assassin was still defeated. His face was full of disbelief, and Joe was even more confused. Frightened, he returned home, only to see Ash appear on the big screen. At first he thought it was just another rumour, but how could a rumour converse with Joe so smoothly? The corpse on the ground had also silently disappeared, making everything even more mysterious. Ash hurried to explain to Joe that this was a long story. With the rapid leap in technology, techniques such as model construction and ultra-realistic scene rendering have fully evolved. Coupled with artificial intelligence's ability to continuously conduct deep autonomous learning, this technology, originally intended for entertainment, was soon recognised by certain intelligence agencies for its immense value. Anthony was originally a software engineer, recruited by the company to collect data and continuously feed real-world information to the AI.
He built models and controlled the analysis. In addition, he took advantage of his position to try to integrate these data resources, aiming to create a vast virtual world with its own digital life.
However, this idea was simply too grand for him to accomplish alone, until another programmer reached out with an unsolicited invitation, having discovered a major flaw in Anthony's system, and helped him complete the missing parts. From then on, a brand new digital universe appeared before the world. It possessed all the functions of the real world: billions of inhabitants with independent consciousness, modern civilization and technology, and a complete set of operating rules. More importantly, it was controllable. Anthony could use this digital universe to test any weather weapons or pharmaceuticals fully, harnessing the immense value they created. In a short period of time, he was promoted to CEO of the company, and from then on, things spiraled out of control. He used this virtual world recklessly: modern warfare, natural disasters, human-caused explosions, nuclear crises. After each version of the world's end, there would be a new backup and upgrade over the course of several decades, with constant fine-tuning and repeated restarts. After a total of 497 world endings, it finally reached the version where Joe is currently located. Until one day, Anthony's research was accidentally leaked. Involving the human rights of billions of people, the ethical implications were simply too great. Faced with public criticism and legal restrictions, he had no choice but to hide this research. Ash was a hacker tracking him, who managed to break in through technical means and log into this virtual world. By chance, Ash discovered a segment of data that was completely out of place with the normal code, and originally intended to use this crucial information to his advantage. Jin was the place where Anthony was hiding in the real world, but he never expected to encounter a twist of fate there. For Chow, he was just one of the billions of virtual lives in this world. But for Ash, Josh himself was the love of her life, and he gave meaning to everything in the world. Under Ash's influence, Josh finally began to accept and learn the rules of this world. Any behavior that violates the laws of physics under administrative privileges would be deemed a system bug. So pain is real pain, and death means true death. The essence of Ash's death was that her personal information and honeymoon period were erased, and she was logged out. This was an ironclad rule of the system's operation. Josh understood this clearly, and then asked whether it was Ash who had been controlling things behind the scenes when he fell from the building. But Ash replied bluntly that she could no longer log into this world. Hacking into the monitor was already the limit of what she could do. The old Josh was someone else entirely. Josh then caught sight of his old friend Oliver in the data images. Aichi was equally surprised that Josh actually knew him. It turned out that he was the other programmer who'd worked with Anthony, but after seeing Anthony's true nature, he had withdrawn from the scene, and many years had passed since then. Only he could help Ash log back into this world. Josh was determined to help find him and arrange a meeting between Ash and him. While the two were making their plans, Anthony was also carrying out his own arrangements. He wanted to find Ash in the real world and eliminate him once and for all. Meanwhile, after learning everything, Oliver took the initiative to contact Ash. The data in Ash's possession was indeed his work, and the fact that Ash was able to discover it was proof of his exceptional ability. But now was not the time to talk about that Ash was in great danger. The assassins sent by the company had already arrived at Ash's door. Fortunately, thanks to Oliver's timely warning, Ash was able to escape the pursuit and make it safely to his house. Oliver couldn't stop praising Ash, saying he was a genius on par with Anthony. More importantly, he possessed a pure and kind heart. Ash, on the other hand, was also full of curiosity about Oliver. He didn't know why Oliver was hiding in a corner of the virtual world selling newspapers, nor did he understand why Oliver had made an exception to save Joe. As for how to use that data, Oliver didn't give a direct answer, simply saying that those things weren't important. What mattered was that he could help Ash find a safe house and provide him with a new honeymoon. This would allow him to go back and retrieve his gun. Even though Joe wasn't real, who could simply define what is real at this point? After some maneuvering, Ash was finally able to embrace Joe tightly once again. When faced with Ash's overwhelming confession of love, Joe didn't know how to respond. She was afraid that anything she said would just be a line of code from the system, and perhaps leaving her would be the best choice for Ash. Just as Ash was about to argue, she silently vanished behind Joe. It turned out that Joe had always been under Anthony's surveillance, and as soon as Ash arrived, Anthony immediately ordered the system to archive this version of the world. He began the reboot process. Anthony, in his madness, was actually planning to take billions of people down with this couple. Oliver realized what he intended and had no choice but to forcibly log Ash out. Hearing this, Ash was both anxious and furious, but could only leave helplessly. But he had no idea that he was already being targeted by an assassin sent by the company. Having lost Ash once again, Joe was clearly not as strong as he appeared on the surface. He hurried to find Oliver, asking about Ash's sudden departure. Obviously, Ash had run into trouble, and Joe didn't know how to help him. When Oliver told him that this world was about to end, Joe, instead, became calm. He could accept being a nobody himself, but he would never allow anyone he loved to be harmed. However, Oliver spoke bluntly, saying not to underestimate the river crossers who only advance and never retreat. Who says a small clan can't handle the hot pot? Years ago, Oliver had set up a digital node in the code, a node that continuously backed up everything in this world in real time. As long as it was activated, it could directly grant the highest level of administrative privileges. Even if this world disappeared, the backup data would restore everything to its original state, along with the key data needed to activate it. It was on Chow himself when he obtained the book Ash had left behind. He had already become the bearer of the Sawtooth. Ash had clearly underestimated the true significance of that Sawtooth. Anthony had also underestimated Oliver's real strength. Now, all that was needed was for Chow to go to the room where Oliver had hidden the node and complete the upload, and everything could be restored. Chow Tingba didn't hesitate for a moment. He went home, grabbed his weapon, and set out immediately. But two assassins were already quietly tailing him. Things weren't peaceful on Ash's end. Either he noticed the assassin following him, rushed into an alley, and hid in a dead end, waiting for the assassin to approach so he could counterattack. But his opponent was clearly skilled as well. After a bout of exchanging moves, Ash ultimately managed to knock him to the ground. Just as Ash was about to leave, he was clearly unaware that the assassin sent by the company always operated in pairs. When Ash woke up, he finally saw Anthony again, only this time it was in reality. He shouted angrily, demanding to know why Anthony had toyed with so many lives. But Anthony retorted sophistically, claiming that what Ash had done to Joe was no different from what he himself had done. Now was not the time for arguing, he said. He had a more important appointment to keep an appointment with an old friend he had known for many years. After many years, Anthony and Oliver finally met again. They deliberately chose the same cafe where they had met after getting out of prison. But the topic of their conversation was completely different from before. Anthony questioned Oliver about why he was interfering in his world, but Oliver replied bluntly that this world was something they had created together. He just didn't want to see Anthony treating it like an amusement park. With every experiment, billions of lives were lost, so he chose to withdraw, but that didn't mean this world had nothing to do with him anymore. Clearly, Anthony didn't care what Oliver thought because it no longer mattered to him. Goodbye, old friend. We'll never meet again. It turned out that as long as Oliver was sitting here, the system could track the data in the background and locate his real-world position, allowing him to be officially logged out from both worlds. Joe was completely unaware of Oliver's departure. At this moment, he had already entered the secret room. Reaching out to touch the control panel, that flickering, leaping sensation surged through his entire body once again. The company's back-end port was immediately hit by a data attack, with massive amounts of data being backed up and transferred. The back-end issued an order to stop it at all costs. Jojo also noticed the assassin downstairs, and it was clear that this room was equipped with an arsenal to handle such situations. Joe armed himself, and the moment he opened the door, he killed Sarge with a single shot. However, Anthony had already lost all patience. Sure enough, he teleported the bridge right in front of himself. The moment Joe saw Anthony, he was ready to attack, but he clearly didn't understand the abilities of the creator standing before him. In an instant, Anthony disarmed Joe and was about to erase him with ease. But as the data activation completed, some unexpected change quietly took place. The highest level of administrative privileges was gradually shifting away from Anthony and was being transferred to Joe. The moment Joe broke free from control, he drew his gun and sent Anthony out of this world. This time, Anthony was truly enraged. He was the creator of this world, its god, its almighty ruler. While he still retained some authority before it was completely taken from him, he decided to destroy everything first. But before that, the two of them should take a good look at how it all unfolds. Under Joe's gaze, the entire world disintegrated and collapsed. Joe didn't know how to save any of Ive, had already done everything he could. His own disappearance now seemed inevitable, and at last, he could be sure of it. He himself was not truly real, but his feelings were the most genuine thing, transcending the rules of this world. They had nothing to do with code or programming. These feelings would not vanish with the destruction of the world, they would remain steadfast until the very end. When everything had settled, Anthony still had no intention of letting Ash go. Just as he was about to eliminate the threat once and for all, Oliver's voice suddenly rang out. The sculpture on the table, which represented the virtual world, silently vanished after a series of strange distortions. Oliver appeared before everyone, and Anthony's face was filled with disbelief. He was certain he had already gotten rid of Oliver, so how could he possibly come back from the dead? Yet Oliver mocked his old friend for his narrow-mindedness. After so many world resets at the Saint level, Anthony still hadn't thought to break free from this fixed way of thinking. Who says that upgrades can only be horizontal iterations? Why can't one ascend to a higher level and upgrade in a higher dimension? With that, Oliver demonstrated another miracle. Countless carbon elements gathered in the air, containing all the substances that make up life. And right before everyone's eyes, they formed Joe's figure. A gun silently appeared in his hand as well. Joe immediately took control of the situation. Anthony still couldn't believe everything that was happening before his eyes, could no longer tell what was real. But that didn't matter. He could ponder it slowly in time. The two survivors embraced each other tightly, feeling the reality of one another. Is it still the roadside, or is it still the cafe? Are they still the same two people? The difference is, this is the real world of fact they still can't comprehend. They look forward to Oliver coming to explain to them just how many layers this world truly has. But Oliver bluntly says that in fact this question no longer has any meaning. If the universe Marjorie is in is like a single grain of sugar, then the world Ash inhabits is a cup of coffee. But beyond the coffee, there's the saucer, the table, and even more beyond that. Just how many layers, how many universes are there who can really say for sure? He merely upgraded Joe from one dimension to another, while the dimension Oliver himself inhabits is clearly even higher than the current one. But that doesn't really matter. What matters is that everyone is a living, breathing person, and what we can perceive is what's real. I, whose intelligence rivals that of Anthony, possesses an even greater brilliance of humanity. His genuine feelings for Joe restored Oliver's hope in this world. No matter how technology advances, or how many dimensions and layers of the universe are discovered or created, what does it really matter? As living beings, experiencing the beauty of life is the ultimate meaning of everything. Joe and Ash's story has come to an end, and Oliver returns to his own room once again. This world has achieved a happy ending, but what about the other worlds?